I'm Malcolm Sparks, and this is my presentation, Building a Secure API Platform. Okay, so I'm a developer, and I've been developing mostly in the Java platform. My projects, even though this is my first API Summit conference, and I'm really, really happy to be here, and this is a wonderful community. I've been building APIs and API servers for about a quarter of a century. And back when I started, it were things like Corba interfaces, interface definition language, and Java RMI, and Enterprise Java Beans. Does anyone remember those? So I just put this up as a kind of history to myself, just to kind of remind myself and you how far we've come and how good things are in comparison to the past. And it was about 2006 that I discovered REST. I didn't get onto the web services, W3C, SOAP stuff. I've never used SOAP, but I've really enjoyed HTTP. And in the last 3 years, I've been really obsessed with building something called Site, which I want to present to you today. This is its first public outing, so I'm a little bit nervous. I started a company about 10 years ago, which is a consulting company based in the UK. And through that company, I've got lots of experience trying to build APIs, backends on databases, all that stuff that we heard about this morning from Bill, about internal APIs in companies that are mostly just wrapping a database. Built all of that stuff. I think we've all got the T-shirt. So when you have that experience, you don't want to kind of reinvent the wheel and constantly having to do the same thing. My company 5 years ago started building a database, which was a document database, and it was through using this database that I realized that actually what I wanted to do is create a web server sitting on a database. And so the idea of Site was born. So what is Site? Well, we've talked a lot about API design first. In my projects, we would often have the API designed by a design team, and then you would get your back-end team to go and build the API. And in some organizations, there's a lot of obstacles. If you're in the back-end team and you have to build an API, it can sometimes take you weeks, sometimes takes you months, and sometimes it can take years. And because the feedback loop is so slow, it's no wonder why the APIs that we build are pretty bad. So we want to improve that. So sometimes we use a mock API, and the mock API allows us to iterate really, really quickly on the API so that we can design a nice API before we get it implemented in the back end. The problem with mock APIs is that they don't do very much. They might just respond to have samples or example responses. They run out of steam quite early on, and you can't use them for things like testing security, or they forget what data you've sent them. There's no real database there. So what I wanted to do is add those things to a mock server and build up the capabilities of a mock server so that perhaps might not even need to build the API. So that is the premise of what I'm trying to do. Really, Site is just a web server backed by a database. The documents in the database database is essentially a key value store, and the documents have a key, and the key is the URI. And it was that kind of idea that got me going with this. So there's no such thing as a router. If you're a developer, you might be aware of kind of routing from URIs to your code. In this system, it's just a document in the database, and so it's a lookup. I spent many years working on libraries around content negotiation and other things, so I kind of really, really went deep into HTTP semantics. So I've found that really an interesting part of the project, and it's not terribly important to get all your HTTP response codes right, but there are some important things that we do need to get right. One of them, which is OAuth 2. Now, I've been about 2 years of my project, I've been working on access control, and it's been a huge labour of love. I was talking to Dan yesterday from APSec University about how broken access control is. In fact, does anyone know where on the US OWASP top 10 broken access control is? It's number one. So I thought if I'm going to unleash something like this on developers, and this is intended for developers just starting out making an API, it's right at the heart, really, of what we're doing, then we don't want to deliver something without access control, so that has to be built in. And the project is 100% open source, and it's written in a JVM language called Clojure, which is a dialect of Lisp. Okay, so I'm going to try in the next, I think I've got 13 minutes, I'm going to try and build an API in front of you from scratch, from nothing. If you wanted to try along at home, there's a Docker image that you can take the slide and have a play when you get home. So I have a local version of site running. Can you see that from the back? This is empty. It has no resources in the database. So I'm going to create I'm going to install a set of bundles, which is just bootstrapping the system with some documents. Now, if you've ever built a kind of secure system, it's always important not to standardize on the password. You don't want to give a password like admin because nobody's going to change it. So the security here is it doesn't know who I am, but what it has done is registered inside this service, and it is a resource server, so it's registered a client called site CLI, the command line interface. And that's what we're going to register, that's what we're going to identify as. So we're going to request a token here. And now I'm logged in, so I can see these are all my resources. Now I'm going to install the initialization process didn't ask me any questions. It's just a standard thing. The only thing that changes is that client secret. That's randomized every time. But this is where I get to choose, do I want the system to be password-based or do I want it to use OpenID Connect? I'm going to just choose password-based, and that should be enough to, if I go to here, you should see. So this is a Swagger API, Swagger UI. It's connecting to localhost. And there we can see a bunch of, this is the system API. Haven't built my application yet. So I'm going to say, who am I? And execute that. It says 401 unauthorized, okay, because we haven't authorized. So we click on the button, authorize. And what I'm going to do is just go in as the Swagger UI, which is one of the applications that has been registered, and click on scope. Now we're at a login screen, but we haven't created any users, so I better do that quickly. So I'm going to add a user, username Mal, password, vbar, okay, and now I can log in. And now I'm at a screen saying that I know who Malcolm is, I know it's you, but Malcolm, do you authorize this application, Swagger, to talk to the to talk to your resources on disk? So I'm going to say yes, I'm going to allow that. I'm going to authorize that. And if you've not seen that, this is how kind of the OAuth2 authorization flow works. And there are 4 different flows that Swagger UI supports. Okay, so now I can do who am I? And it will tell me, here we are, a bunch of operations that I can call, and now here I'm Mal. Now if I want to see all the other users in the system, I can try that out. I'm going to execute that. 403. Does anyone know what 403 means? It's this code for computer says no. So we're going to, the reason it says no is because this is using, for this operation, it's using role-based access control, and I'm not in a role. So I need to give myself a particular role of site admin. And now I can execute that again. And I get a 200 response body, and I can see the list of users as only 1. Okay, so that's that. But I can install any API that I want. And I've got one on disk, which I know, I was talking to Phil Sturgeon before the talk, and he gave me some advice. He said, everybody at the conference loves the pet store. The pet store is the best API, and everyone. So that's the thing I'm going to demo today. So I've got a Swagger pet store. This is just taken off. I'm going to call it the Nordics API Summit Pet Store. Okay, and that will go in. Okay, and now I'm going to use my site tool to install my OpenAPI. That's gone in. So now, if I go and change this up here from _site, I'm going to change that to pet store. And hey, that's our API. We've created a pet store. We've just imported the OpenAPI, and it's running. Well, it's kind of running. I mean, I can try getting some pets. Let's try that out. Oh, we've got a 500 error. Right? That's possibly because I haven't installed some operations. So let me do that. Install operations. Let's execute that now. Oh, it's gone to 401. That's because I haven't authorized. So let's authorize, and let's be the pet store this time. Oh. I'm going to log in as something else. I probably got a configuration error there, so I'm going to go back and log in as. There we are. So I'm going to, the pet store has two scopes that I've added, read stuff and write stuff, so I'm going to allow myself both of those. And now I'm going to, now we've authorized, but we're forbidden, because I've made this access control limited to only pet store, the role of pet store owner can call get pets. So I've got to become the pet store owner. So what I'll do here, because I'm logged in here as, I'm going to say assign user role, mal as role. And now when I execute, I get a 200. Oh, but there are no pets. So I'll go back here, and I'm going to install some pets. Now this command line client is now saying 403 because I'm logged in, or I'm authenticated as an application. So I'm site CLI. But because I created myself as a user, I can now request a token on the command line as my user. And now I can do things like install pets, and I'm installing some pets. And now when I execute here, here are all my pets. They're all my pets, but I've given the Swagger pet store running on swagger.io access through the auth2 mechanism to see these private pets. So that's the end of the demo. That's it. How long have I got left? 3 minutes. So what I've been able to demonstrate is this kind of idea of starting with nothing and taking an API that you might have designed in an API designer and just importing it into the system. And then being able to define having OAuth2 completely built into the system allows me to just proceed, but knowing that if I put this into production, everything is then secure. The system allows you to register clients, so anybody could create a pet store application now. You could create one for your ChatGPT client, one for a mobile app, and they can register, just like registering apps in GitHub or Stripe, where you have the client ID and client secret. These system API allows you to do all of that sort of thing, but it's your own server, it's your own platform. You can host multiple APIs on the same system, and you can, just through adding different packages, you can turn something from a resource server to making it be an authorization server. Or you might decide to have one authorization server for your organization and 10 different resource servers. So all this is really doing is taking a generic server and teaching it new capabilities by adding packages. So you take take this pet store and its operation, and you can deploy it any way you like onto other people's nodes. So it's a sort of drag and drop capability of APIs. Now, I showed quite a lot on the command line, and I hope that didn't sort of scare you off, because that command line doesn't have any extra privileges to any other application. In fact, you could write a UI, and we're doing that in a tool called Inside, where you can use a UI to do everything that I did on the command line. It's just that, for the time, things were a bit faster on the command line. But anyway, thank you very much. That's it, and it was really good to talk to you.